I adore teaching. I have such a pleasure to be before somebody I try to discover. I try to find his ultimate qualities and usually find that there is one place where perhaps not to become a good musician, but to become a man. There is a power in this man. And this discovery of the personality is for me an expression of respect, of love, of understanding, very meaningful.
Good morning, PASW staff, clients, and friends joining us. Welcome to Tuesday's class. That was very rare footage of perhaps the most important teacher of all time, important teacher of the 20th century for sure. And as Ned Warm, the composer, pointed out, perhaps the most important teacher since Socrates. And today we'll be talking about Nadia Boulanger. Nadia Boulanger may be responsible for the music that came out of the 20th century. And I'm not talking only about classical music, although that's what she taught, but music, all kinds of music. And we're going to look at a few composers that studied with her that had all different styles of that wasn't just classical music, but they had careers of music with their own voice. But so what was it about her that they learned from her, and what were her methods, and what did she do? Well, I mean, you know, just wait. We'll find out. We gotta go through this together, and try to uncover what was her genius of teaching. So she's a very interesting lady in many ways. Her father was a composer and a pianist, and her mother was actually a princess, a Russian princess. And she has a sister, Lily, and they're both composers. So Nadia was born in 1887. Her sister's born 6 years later. And they're both composers at a very young age. Nadia starts enrolling in the Paris Conservatory, a very famous music school, at the age of 9, and starts learning music from Fauré. Fauré is one of the most famous French composers of all time. If you remember, we did a class on Ravel a few weeks ago. Ravel was hugely influenced by Fauré. She studies with him, and but then something happens in her life where something devastating, and her sister Lily dies from Crohn's disease at the age of 24. And it's at that time that Nadia gives up composing, and she's about 30 or so, and she's devastated, and she never writes any music after that. But she finds her true calling, which is teaching. So we're going to talk about some of the musicians that studied with her, and I'm not just throwing out random names. I've chosen a few special musicians in the 20th century that we all probably know. So first, we're going to start with Aaron Copland. Aaron Copland we talked about in the Rodgers and Hammerstein class. Aaron Copland was a very famous American composer, and we talked about Richard Rodgers being influenced a little bit by his rodeo. And that was one of her students. Another student was Philip Glass. We talked about Philip Glass a few months ago. Another student was Astor Piazzolla, who we haven't talked about, but we'll learn about him, kind of the father of the tango music. Another person was Quincy Jones, who studied with her. And another one was Michel Legrand, a jazz composer. So we're going to look at classical, minimalism, jazz. It's hard to categorize Quincy Jones because, you know, it's pop, it's Michael Jackson, it's all these different kinds of music. So we're going to look at all these different kinds of music and how they all studied with this one teacher in her Paris apartment. And she taught in that same apartment mostly until she died, until she was 92 years old. So although we won't get into the specifics of the mechanics of what she taught about musically, we will talk about her teaching methods.
Quand vous recevez un nouvel élève, un jeune homme vient à vous, la première chose, c'est d'essayer de comprendre quel don naturel, quel don intuitif il a. Très souvent, on le découvrirait très facilement si on avait un vrai respect de l'enfance. Et c'est un problème très grave, parce qu'est-ce qu'il faut impunément développer un enfant dans une autre direction que celle de ses parents si on n'est pas sûr que son don doit être développé, doit être aidé, mais pas vouloir donner un don à tout le monde, ce qui est une folie.
So what her classes consisted of really was traditional harmony, score reading at the piano, counterpoint analysis, sight singing, stuff that you learn at a conservatory. But she, like I said, she just taught in her apartment. But she disapproved of innovation for innovation's sake. So she said, when you're writing music of your own, never strain to avoid the obvious. So she was very interested in making sure you understood the language and technique of music so well, where you could, once you had those tools and mastered them, you could find and use your own voice with that. She was all about finding the originality of and the character, like she talked about in one of her lectures.
S'il a le don extraordinaire, s'il a une technique extraordinaire, mais qu'il n'a pas un caractère, tout est perdu.
I think her philosophy was you needed to master these things so you could find yourself, or you could have the liberty to be yourself, and that was her philosophy. That, well, kind of simply put, learn the rules very well so you can break them. But it wasn't this. Although she did group lectures, she did one-on-one. It wasn't. She refused to write a textbook of her theory and her methods, because her aim was really to enlarge the individual students' skills and gifts, and the individual gifts. So it really was with each pupil she would take on, she would try to find what was special and unique about their character. And she talks about in a lecture that she had to turn away certain pupils because even though they mastered technique and they mastered all these things, they didn't have something, or they didn't have character. And she's very interested in having the individual voice and the character that a composer should have.
Je suis séparée de 2 élèves parce que je savais, je ne voulais pas coopérer à ça. Très doué, très intelligent. Non, un n'a pas beaucoup de technique non plus, mais enfin, très doué, très intelligent, mais pas de caractère. Eh bien, sans caractère, on ne peut attendre rien de personne. Nous avons à faire très, très attention.
So she gave them the academic musical analysis, the training, yet enabled each of them to find their own language. And that might be the definition of what a great teacher is, to give you the tools and the technique and the things you need to do to be yourself, to be your own true character, artist, not to emulate somebody else or to copy somebody else just because, this is the way. We need to all find our own ways of getting there and doing it. So Quincy Jones, we all know that name. We all know that brilliant musician. So he studies with her in the 1950s in Paris. He says he owed everything he knew, everything he was as a musician, to her instruction. So how does somebody that's the producer of Michael Jackson's Thriller, what did she find in him to allow him to be, that's a big statement to say. He's one of the most influential musicians of all time, composers, producers, and if he learned everything from this little French lady in her apartment, it's just, I don't know. We'll never know because we weren't there for those lessons, obviously. But that's interesting. The other composer, Astor Piazzolla, tango music. We're not talking about it's sophisticated tango music, but we're not talking about Stravinsky here. We're talking about a great, accordion, great accordion music. Michel Legrand, a French composer who made a great living writing jazz music. So again, a different genre of music, and he learned everything from her. Minimalism with Philip Glass. Listen, how did this music come from her? So I think her method was very slow and methodical, but it seems like her classes were legendary because of their ability to wring deep historical meaning just from simple exercises. So from playing the piano and taking out certain notes of the harmony and to play the bass line only, to play a Bach fugue, but to have the person in the classroom sing the tenor line. Stuff that's very, very hard and we won't go into, but I think it was a very slow, important approach, and that's, I think, how she got the greatness out of people, because once they could do that, they could do anything. I love her quote. She says, "Loving a child doesn't mean giving in to all his whims. To love him is to bring out the best in him, to teach him to love what is difficult." So I think what made her so great was that she understood that we have to value tradition, we have to know where we're coming from, we have to know about history, about music, about acting, we have to know about these things. That's why I'm here every day, to share with you these things, that we have to understand what's happened before, and we have to have a good grasp of that. More than good, a great grasp of that in order, and then we have to move forward with that, with our individuality, with our character. It would be very boring to just have brilliant technique and brilliant knowledge, but no original personality, no original character. I think that she would say that, and I think I would agree with that. Otherwise, you're just kind of a robot, right? And robots are fine, but I don't really want to have a conversation with somebody that's devoid of real character and feeling and beauty, and somebody that understands things, the contradictions of life, the contradictions of music, of literature, of art, the beauty, all of these things that enrich a human being. So an amazing woman, amazing musician, amazing person. She was literally the first woman to conduct major orchestras in Europe and United States. The New York Phil, the BBC, the Boston Symphony. And like we talked about with her pupils, she was great at finding their individual gifts, bringing that out, but not bringing that out with just, hey, go and do this. No, you need to learn the language of it and master the language of music. And when I know I'm going back to music, but this could apply to any discipline: acting, dancing, all of these things, art. Know it backwards and forwards, study it, learn as much as you can of it, and then be free. And I think that's good for us. I think that we should all have that in our philosophy, in our lives moving forward. So I hope you enjoyed this class. Nadia Boulanger, brilliant lady, elegant, and just changed the music, I would say, of the 20th century with jazz and classical and R&B. I don't think she discriminated against different kinds of music. She just wanted you to understand the rules first. We got to understand the rules so we can break them. So, okay. Yes, I have said it all. I know you were thinking that. So I have. So love you guys and miss you guys. And we're going to have some fun this week. So I'm looking forward to some stuff coming up. And remember to turn in your assignment for Melancholia your film scoring assignment tomorrow by midnight, and I can't wait to look at some of those. We're gonna have way too much fun this week, but we'll contain it in a good way. Okay, love you guys, miss you guys. See you tomorrow.